The air was thick with dust, so dense it felt almost alive, clinging to your throat, heavy with sweat, with fear. Somewhere beyond that suffocating haze, you could hear it. The pounding of hooves, slow at first, then faster, louder, relentless, each odor shaking the ground beneath your feet. Then came the screams. Not scattered cries, not isolated panic, but long, piercing wails that tore through the city as the gates finally gave way. In the narrow alleys of Samarkand, women clung to each other, silk robes ripping as they ran. There was nowhere left to go, nowhere to hide. Arrows sliced through the air with a chilling precision, striking flesh before you even heard them land. Blood soaked into the ancient streets, turning stone slick and treacherous underfoot. One by one, the proud towers of the city fell silent. Banners that once stood for wealth, for knowledge, for culture, crushed beneath iron-shod boots. And yet, this was only the beginning. Because the true horror didn't arrive with the attack. It came after, with the victors. Men who no longer saw people, only prizes. As the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the chaos, a whisper spread among those still breathing. This wasn't just conquest. This was erasure. What you're about to hear involves massacres, enslavement, and the deliberate targeting of women in ways that still echo through history. These events come from real chronicles, accounts written by those who witnessed it or survived it. This isn't about glorifying suffering. It's about understanding the system behind it, the strategy, the machinery, how terror itself became a weapon. If it becomes too much, step away. No judgment. But if you stay, we're going to pull back the curtain, because this wasn't random brutality. It was engineered, a calculated storm designed to shatter empires and rebuild them in the image of one man. In the year 1220, the Mongol horde descended on Samarkand, the glittering jewel of Central Asia, not out of blind rage, but as part of something far more deliberate, a system, one that turned fear into fuel. At the time, the Khwarezmian Empire stretched from the Caspian Sea to the Indus River, vast, wealthy, powerful, and it made a fatal mistake. Mongol envoys were killed, executed, and dismissed as a bold act of defiance. But what followed wasn't just war. It was retaliation on a continental scale. Cities like Samarkand became testing grounds, laboratories for tactics that would reshape the world. And this still matters, because it shows how a single insult can spiral into a machine that devours millions. It teaches us about power, about the dark arithmetic of fear, how terror multiplies obedience, how systems like this leave scars that echo into our own time. But to understand how it all fell apart, we have to go back to where it began. Picture the Mongolian steppe in the late 1100s. Endless grasslands stretching beneath unforgiving skies. A world where tribes clashed like starving wolves, fighting for grazing land, for survival itself. Children learned to ride before they could speak clearly, learned to shoot before they understood mercy. Life was harsh, and mercy was rare. Into this world, around 1162, a boy was born near the Onon River. His name was Temujin. Legend says he came into the world clutching a blood clot in his fist, a sign of destiny. But his early life was anything but glorious. His father, a minor chieftain, was poisoned by rivals when Temujin was just 9 years old. Overnight, everything collapsed. His family was abandoned by allies, cast out into the wilderness. They survived however they could, digging roots from frozen earth, hunting small animals just to stay alive through brutal winters. Temujin learned something early. Weakness meant death. He was captured at one point, enslaved by enemies. But he escaped through sheer will and began gathering followers, not because of his bloodline, but because of something else. Loyalty, shared hunger, shared struggle. He built alliances through strategy and marriage. Not long after marrying Borte, she was kidnapped during a raid, a common reality in that lawless world. Temujin didn't accept it. He rallied warriors, tracked her captors, and brought her back. It was his first real victory, but betrayal was never far behind. His sworn blood brother eventually turned against him, and when Temujin defeated him, he made an example. 70 enemies were boiled alive, not out of madness, out of message. On the steppe, unity meant survival. Resistance meant annihilation. By 1206, Temujin had done what few thought possible. He united the warring tribes. At a great assembly, he was given a new name, Genghis Khan, universal ruler. What he built next wasn't just an empire. It was something new. Society itself was reorganized into a living army. People divided into units, tens, hundreds, thousands. Merit replaced bloodline. A shepherd could rise to become a general. Loyalty was enforced through a network of spies woven into every rank. Horses were bred for endurance, arrows engineered to pierce armor. This wasn't chaos. This was innovation. A mobile war machine, fueled by plunder, by promise, and by fear. Conquered enemies weren't always destroyed. Many were absorbed, their skills repurposed. But the rule was simple: submit and live, resist and disappear. Genghis Khan turned outward. Northern China fell first. Cities sacked, dynasties humbled. Tribute flowed back in silk, iron, and engineers. But one event would ignite everything. In 1218, Genghis sent a trade caravan to the Khwarezmian Empire. It never made it. The governor of Otrar seized it and executed the merchants. Genghis demanded justice. Instead, Shah Muhammad II responded with insult, having Mongol envoys beheaded, sending one head back, shaved. That decision sealed the fate of an empire. Genghis mobilized over 100,000 riders. The storm that had been born on the steppe began to move west, and nothing in its path would remain the same. The first city to feel that storm was Otrar. It didn't fall quickly. The siege dragged on, weeks of pressure, starvation tightening its grip, hope slowly bleeding out. But when the walls finally gave way, the punishment was deliberate. The governor who had ordered the executions was captured. Molten silver was poured into his eyes and his ears, a symbolic end for a man who had refused to see and refused to listen. It wasn't just revenge, it was a message. And that message spread faster than the army itself. The Mongols didn't move as one lumbering force. They split, dividing into multiple columns, striking cities at the same time. To their enemies, it felt like they were everywhere at once. Defenses collapsed under the pressure. Shah Muhammad fled, abandoning his empire piece by piece. He was chased across his own lands, until finally, alone and broken, he died on an island in the Caspian Sea. His son, Jalal ad-Din, tried to rally what remained. But by then, the machine was already in motion. The Mongols perfected deception. Feigned retreats lured armies into traps. Captured engineers were forced to build siege weapons, machines that hurled fire, stone, and terror into the heart of cities. And ahead of all of it came the rumors. Stories of invincibility, of entire populations erased. Often fear alone was enough to break resistance before the first arrow was ever fired. By early 1220, The road to Samarkand lay open. Samarkand, a city that symbolized everything the Khwarezmian Empire stood for. Towering minarets reaching into the sky. Bustling bazaars filled with traders from every corner of the known world. Scholars, poets, astronomers. Knowledge flowing through its streets like lifeblood. In spring, the Zarafshan Valley bloomed with apricot blossoms, filling the air with sweetness. To those who lived there, it felt eternal, untouchable. Among them was Aisha, 20 years old, the daughter of a scholar named Rahman. Her world was quiet, steady, spent mostly in her father's library. By lamplight, she copied ancient texts onto fresh parchment. Poetry, astronomy, histories of long-dead empires. To her, the city felt permanent, as if knowledge itself could protect it. But then the refugees began to arrive. They came in waves, exhausted, broken, eyes wide with something deeper than fear. They spoke of cities burned to ash, of rivers clogged with bodies, of armies that didn't stop. The Shah promised reinforcements. Help was coming. It never did. One morning, before the sun had fully risen, something appeared on the horizon, a wall of dust, and beneath it, movement. The Mongols had arrived. They didn't rush the city, they encircled it. Riders forming a living noose around Samarkand, tightening day by day. Catapults began their work. Stone after stone slammed into the walls, day and night, without pause. Inside, panic spread like fire. The garrison argued in hushed voices. Some demanded resistance, fight to the end. Others saw what was coming and understood the truth. Rahman was one of them. "These are not men," he told those who would listen. "They are a force of nature." On the third day, a desperate sortie charged out of the gates. They were erased. Arrows fell like rain, cutting them down before they could even reach the enemy lines. By the fifth day, something broke. Hope. Rahman stepped forward, joining a delegation. They carried gifts. They carried pleas. They walked out through the gates to meet Genghis Khan, and he listened. Then he gave his terms. The city would surrender its warriors, its wealth, everything. The gates opened, and the Mongols entered. Not as a chaotic mob, but with chilling order. People were driven together like livestock, families torn apart in moments, men separated from women, children pulled away from parents. From the rooftop of her home, Aisha watched her world fracture. It didn't take long. The order came quickly. The garrison was disarmed, then executed. 30,000 soldiers killed in a single afternoon. Their bodies piled outside the walls. A warning, not written in ink, but in flesh. Not everyone was killed. Artisans, craftsmen, scholars, they were spared. Valuable, useful. They were marched east, absorbed into the growing empire. Everyone else was divided. Young women were claimed. Not randomly, systematically. Aisha didn't even have time to understand what was happening. She was pulled away from her father, her hands slipping from his grasp as she screamed. But her voice vanished into the noise, into the sound of a city dying. This wasn't chaos. It was policy. Samarkand had become the example. The Mongols didn't loot in a frenzy. They moved with structure, almost ritualistic in their precision. Quotas were assigned. Each warrior received a share. Nothing was left to chance. This wasn't driven by impulse. It was designed. A system meant to reward loyalty, to dilute conquered bloodlines, to break entire populations in a single calculated stroke. Rahman survived. His knowledge made him valuable, but survival came at a cost. He stood helpless, watching as his daughter disappeared beyond the city, into the camps, into a future that erased everything she had been. Historians argue over numbers, but even the most conservative accounts agree. Thousands of women were taken from Samarkand alone. Their lives weren't ended. They were rewritten, absorbed into an empire that saw them not as people, but as resources. This wasn't just punishment. It was a message. Every city watching, every ruler hesitating. This is what resistance costs. And yet, even here, something unexpected took root. Resistance, not with swords, but with memory. Rahman, now forced into service as an advisor, began to observe, quietly, carefully. He studied the Mongols, their strengths, but also their weaknesses. He noticed how dependent they were on grazing land, how distance strained their supply lines, how speed, their greatest advantage, could also become a vulnerability. And he wrote, in secret, hiding his notes among looted manuscripts. Knowledge became his rebellion, small, invisible, but real. The first crack in a system that claimed to be unstoppable. Meanwhile, the machine kept moving. Aisha's story didn't end in Samarkand. From scattered survivor accounts, her fate can be traced across the open steppe. She was claimed by a Mongol officer. Her life reshaped completely. She bore children who would never know Samarkand except as a story. Her past became something distant, almost unreal. The library, the lamplight, the quiet rhythm of copying words that had survived centuries, gone. This was how the system perfected itself. Enemies became family, cultures absorbed, reshaped, repurposed. It's uncomfortable, but familiar. Even today, empires speak of integration, of assimilation, rarely acknowledging the cost carried by individuals. The Mongols simply did it faster, and far more brutally. From the ruins of Samarkand, the horde split again, like a blade shattering into pieces, each one cutting in a different direction. Genghis sent his sons north, toward Urgench, the beating heart of the Khwarezmian Empire. And what happened there would strip away any illusion that this conquest had limits. Urgench did not fall easily. Built along the banks of the Amu Darya River, it was rich, crowded, and fiercely defended. For months it resisted. Walls held, streets remained intact. And for a brief moment, it seemed like maybe, just maybe, the Mongol advance could be slowed. But the Mongols adapted. They always did. When direct assault failed, they turned the land itself into a weapon. They diverted the river. Engineers, many of them captured from earlier conquests, helped dam the flow. Slowly, deliberately, water began to rise. Streets turned into canals. Foundations weakened. Walls, once unshakable, began to crack under pressure. Time became the enemy. And eventually, the city broke. What followed was not swift. It was not controlled. It was something else entirely. A merchant from Bukhara, who had fled ahead of the Mongols but later found himself trapped in Urgench, left behind an account. His words trembled with what he had seen. He described hiding in a cellar as the slaughter began. Above him, the world ended. Streets ran red. The sound of screaming didn't stop. It layered, one voice over another, until it became a constant, unbearable noise. Homes were torn open. Families dragged out into the open. Pyramids of skulls rose where houses once stood. Neighbors disappeared in moments. Women were herded together, driven like animals. Many were never seen again. This wasn't the calculated terror of Samarkand. This was something heavier, slower, grinding, extermination. Children were not spared. The violence fed itself, each act fueling the next, spiraling beyond even the structure that had once contained it. Historians argue over the numbers. Some accounts claim up to 1.2 million dead. That figure is debated. Medieval chroniclers were known to exaggerate. But the intent? That's not in doubt. The system allowed for this, encouraged it. Plunder rewarded those who killed the most. Terror ensured that the next city might surrender before the first arrow was fired. And then, in the middle of it all, the merchant recorded something strange, a moment that didn't seem to belong. Amid smoke and screams, a Mongol warrior paused, not to kill, not to shout, but to look. In front of him stood a captured peacock, its feathers shimmering with color, impossibly vibrant against the gray ash and blood. For just a heartbeat, he admired it. Beauty, cutting through brutality, a flicker of something human. Then it was gone, swallowed again by the machine. Because the machine didn't stop, it couldn't. Messages traveled rapidly along the YAM, the Mongol relay network. A system so efficient it could carry information across continents with terrifying speed. Orders flowed. Generals like Subutai executed them with precision. Their success determined everything: promotion, power, survival. Failure meant death. Victory meant more responsibility and more destruction. The wave moved south. Cities like Merv, Nishapur, each one learning the same lesson. Resistance didn't lead to negotiation, it led to annihilation. In Nishapur, the death of a single Mongol prince triggered something extreme. The entire city was erased. Not conquered, not occupied, erased. Survivors were forced to count severed heads, proving that no one remained alive. Fields were abandoned. Roads fell silent. Entire regions emptied of life. The merchant from Bukhara eventually escaped Urgench, disguised as a beggar. He carried nothing with him except memory, stories, warnings. His account reveals something deeper than battles or sieges. It shows how fear itself became a weapon. Cities began to unravel before Mongol riders even appeared on the horizon. By the end of 1220, the Khwarezmian Empire was no longer an empire. It was fragments. Samarkand subdued, Urgench destroyed, the Shah dead. But resistance hadn't completely vanished. In the south, Jalal ad-Din, son of the Shah, gathered what forces he could. Desperate, outnumbered, but unwilling to disappear quietly. He struck Mongol outposts, quick attacks, fleeting victories, enough to get Genghis Khan's attention. And that was dangerous, because Genghis didn't ignore defiance. He adapted to it. He responded instantly, pursuing Jalal across rivers, across mountains, stretching his own supply lines just to keep the pressure constant. This wasn't just about winning anymore. It was about sending a message. No one escapes. The final confrontation came at the banks of the Indus River. Jalal's army stood there, smaller, exhausted, but determined. They knew what was coming, and they fought anyway. Arrows darkened the sky. Steel clashed with a force that drowned out even the roar of the river. From a nearby hill, Genghis Khan watched. Reports flowed to him constantly, scouts feeding him information, movements, weaknesses. Jalal charged again and again, breaking through Mongol lines through sheer courage. For moments, it seemed impossible, like defiance itself had taken form. But each time, the Mongol formations closed again, disciplined, unbreakable. One by one, Jalal's men fell, cut down, crushed under hooves, swept into the river. The air filled with the smell of iron and wet earth. Defeat became inevitable. And in that final moment, Jalal made a choice. He spurred his horse forward, straight toward the river, and jumped into the current, escaping, barely, Genghis watched, silent. It said he admired what he saw. A father should have such a son. But admiration didn't change anything. The battlefield was left behind, covered in bodies. Thousands dead. An empire reduced to memory. And yet, for the first time, something shifted. Not victory, strain. The pursuit had stretched the Mongol system thin. Distance, terrain, overextension. Even a machine like this had limits. Genghis saw it, and he adjusted. He called off the chase, turned back. The machine bent, but it didn't break. Still, something had changed. Seeds had been planted. Survivors began to rebuild, quietly, cautiously. Knowledge passed from hand to hand. Whispered, hidden. Rahman's writings, those secret observations, survived. Smuggled out among stolen books, carried beyond the reach of the empire that tried to control everything. Because the conquest had shattered more than cities. It had shattered an illusion. The idea that terror could erase memory, that domination could be absolute. The Mongols had won, but they hadn't silenced everyone, and history was still watching. In the years that followed, Genghis Khan consolidated what he had taken. Samarkand didn't vanish, but it changed. Those who remained were folded into a new order. Tribute replaced independence. Skill replaced identity. The city that had once been a beacon of knowledge became something else. A waypoint. A node in a vast imperial network that stretched farther than anything the world had seen. And the expansion didn't stop, because the machine was still moving.